This video will contain spoilers from the off, so remember, you've been warned. The Idol is one of the most talked about shows at the moment, and it's safe to say that the controversy far outweighed the actual show prior to its release. And whilst the controversy hasn't gone away, there's been a few other things that have been mentioned about the show. One of those things is The Weeknd, an actor who plays the character Tedros. The Weeknd's acting skills have been criticised and questioned after the first couple of episodes, and I've also done that myself. So I thought I'd break down and explain The Weeknd's performance and answer if he's actually any good. So let's get into it. Here is The Weeknd good in The Idol? Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. So The Weeknd is playing a character called Tedros in the show, and so far, we don't really know that much about him. But what we do know is that he's some kind of cult leader that's currently looking to exploit Lily Rose Depp's character Jocelyn whilst she's in a vulnerable state following the death of her mother, whilst also trying to navigate an industry that she's feeling more and more alienated from due to disagreeing with the direction of her career and the music that she's putting out. It's a cool concept, right? Something that does draw you in. However, in episode 1, the show felt like it was a bit all over the place, and the responsibility at that point should have been put on everybody. But it was in episode 2 of the show where we saw that the potential that the show could reach will most likely be hindered due to the storyline that involved The Weeknd and his performing abilities. Prior to The Weeknd appearing on screen, we saw Jocelyn break down due to missing her mother and the pressure of her work and the rate that she needed to go at starting to get the better of her, and we watched her getting so caught up inside of her own mind and feeling as though she couldn't do it on her own. However, the moment that The Weeknd appeared in the final third of the episode, the show took a sharp turn downwards and we saw the quality decrease slightly. This is most probably due to the writing, but it's also down to the performing abilities and the way that Tedros was delivered to us. I'll break the rest of the video down by his performances in episode 1 of the show and also in episode 2. Let's look at Tedros in episode 1. In the first episode, I'd say that we got more from the character in terms of learning about him when compared to the second, or at least we saw a side to him that he wanted us to see. However, the core of the character felt extremely two-dimensional and flat. All of the dialogue that The Weeknd had to offer us as Tedros lacked any real substance and was extremely inconsequential, ultimately resulting in conversation between both Joss and Tedros where you wondered how she ended up being wooed by him, as nothing that he said or the way that he behaved felt convincing or like it was going to be able to win somebody over. Despite Joss being a character that seemed quite mentally unstable at the time that we first saw her, she did seem like a character that would be able to know what she wanted and see through certain things. Yet what we saw with The Weeknd's character surprised me. This isn't solely on The Weeknd, it's on the writers of the show, but The Weeknd's delivery was somewhat questionable and lacked a lot of conviction. We also got the start of some of the dialogue that was used in the scenes where the pair of them are being intimate with one another. However, at that point, we didn't know that it was going to get worse in episode 2. In episode 1, the best performance from The Weeknd came when he was in the distance behind the DJ decks talking on the mic, because it was the easiest thing to do. He was in the distance, had to shout over music, and there was no real facial expressions or emotions that needed to be read. So I think that kind of says a lot about the type of performance that was given in episode 1. Now let's move on to episode 2. Within episode 2, we had a lot less screen time with the character Tedros, which ultimately resulted in the second episode's overarching plot being able to be leaned in on more, and for us to see how good of an actor Lily Rose Depp actually was in the role of Joss. However, there were short sections that contained The Weeknd on the phone, and then the final third which featured him heavily. Let's start with the scene where he was on the phone. During this call, we saw that the bare minimum was needed from him in terms of his performance. He just had to sit there, answer the call, and respond to Lily's character. He had shades on, so we couldn't see his eyes, and it was just short, sharp sentences. So there wasn't that much that could go wrong. The main performance by him in this episode came at the end of it, in the final third where he arrived at the house following Joss returning home after her shoot went terribly wrong after she broke down. By this point in the episode, it felt like we'd watched something that had a vast amount of improvement on episode 1. The graphic nature was toned down, Lily Rose Depp wasn't walking around with next to nothing on, and we got to see a side to Joss that we hadn't seen before. A deep look inside of her mind and a character that we could come to understand. But then the show did a full twist and ended up switching on its head when The Weeknd appeared. Like the first episode, we saw dialogue that was just extremely forgettable. didn't bring anything to the developing narrative, and the both of them just engaging in intimate activities. Every time that we've seen The Weeknd, it feels like he has the same facial expression, same tone in his voice, and it's one that's relatively blank and doesn't show you what he's truly feeling. The moment of pure cringe in this episode though came when Tedros was speaking to Joss when she was on the bed. I can't repeat it on here, but I think you know which line I'm talking about. That's where I feel with lines like that, whoever's playing the role is going to find themselves being questioned. The writing is a big issue for this character, and that's why all of the blame can't be put on The Weeknd's shoulders. So will it get better? Well, so far the bottom line is, when The Weeknd's character appears, the show gets worse. That's a fact, and it seems to be something that's shared amongst many viewers of the show as well, and it's also something that's been present in the comments section. Whilst it does sit on The Weeknd's shoulders in terms of his performance, a performer can only deliver a good performance and a convincing character if the writing is there for them. And that's something that I think, when combined with The Weeknd's abilities, it ends up being a cocktail for an almost disaster. He's definitely the weak link in the show, and his performance does fall below par, especially when compared to other actors who have a bit more experience, such as Lily Rose Depp. That's why I feel as though the scenes where he's on his own or he's on his phone aren't really that bad, because you can't really get them wrong and he's not really engaging with anybody. It's when he's paired up against some others that his abilities and just lack of them are exposed slightly. If there was a more seasoned actor in his role, then maybe that arm of the story that he's carrying could well be a lot more interesting, but for now it's just not that convincing or delivered that well. So to answer the title of the video, is The Weeknd good? In short, no. But it's not entirely his fault. His acting abilities are not the best in the world, but the writing of the character hasn't been the best either. It feels like the character has been written but not developed, like they almost forgot what made up the identity of the character. In the trailer for the next episode, it did look like we would be seeing a different side to Tedros, so that's something that I am interested in seeing. Because if we see more of The Weeknd's performance, then we could see a vast improvement on what's to come. But for now, that story is the one that really prevents the show from feeling like it's any good. And part of that has to sit on The Weeknd's shoulders. So, there you have it. Is The Weeknd good in The Idol? If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of his performance? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.